You are not poor because opportunity is lacking. You are stuck because your mind calls fear prudence and calls cowardice faith. Listen carefully. If there is no real risk of loss, there will never be a real chance to win. Zero risk is just a polished name for stagnation. And stagnation in the Bible has another name: death in disguise. The world repeats like a numbing mantra: the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. But almost no one has the courage to ask why. And even fewer can tolerate the answer. Jesus said, "The poor you will always have with you, not as destiny, but as a diagnosis of a mind that refuses to govern." Now answer me without romanticizing it. Do you feel like someone who is advancing, or someone who is merely surviving? You pray, fast, work hard, strive, yet at the end of the month you still feel like the money runs out before the mission does. You want to do more for your family, more for your church, more for the kingdom. But the uncomfortable truth is this: you are managing scarcity, not governing abundance. And here is the shock almost no one dares to say out loud. Poverty is not just a lack of money. It is a mental system, an invisible trap, a silent programming, a code implanted in the mind that makes you run from exactly what could free you. You call it caution. Heaven calls it burying talents. While you try not to lose, others understand an ancient spiritual and brutal law. Whoever does not expose themselves to the possibility of loss has already decided, in advance, never to win. The kingdom of God was never a shelter for fragile minds. It has always been a field of governance where servants are tested by how much they can multiply, not by how much they can preserve. This video is not for those who want comfort. It is not for those who want a pretty word. It is for those who suspect deep in their soul that they were trained to think small in the name of false humility. Because the trap is not in the financial system. It is not in the government. It is not in the devil. The trap is in how you interpret risk, God, and yourself. And if you keep thinking the same way, you will keep calling prison, security, and failure the will of God. Let's rip the lie out by the roots. The problem is not the system, not the government, not the devil, not your family, not the church, not the lack of opportunity. These are comfortable alibis the mind uses to avoid facing the mirror. The most efficient trap that exists is the one that convinces the prisoner that the cell is on the outside. You were trained to blame external forces because that preserves your current identity. As long as the culprit is outside, you don't have to change inside. As long as the enemy is external, your mind remains untouched. But the Bible never treated the external world as the true battlefield. From Genesis to Revelation, the battlefield has always been the mind, the conscience, the decision. Eden did not fall because of a lack of resources. It fell because of a wrong interpretation of reality. The desert did not last 40 years because of a lack of provision. It lasted because of a slave mentality. Israel left Egypt in one night, but Egypt took generations to leave Israel's mind. And here is the sentence that will bother you, and needs to. God does not negotiate destiny with those who refuse to govern their thoughts. You can pray correctly and think wrongly. You can fast correctly and decide wrongly. You can declare promises while sabotaging your own future with fear disguised as prudence. Napoleon Hill called this a divided mind. The Bible calls it double-mindedness. Both agree on one brutal truth: a divided mind never inherits territory. You say you want to prosper, but you run from every situation that requires risk, exposure, responsibility, and growth. You say you want more, but you fiercely protect the little you have, as if the little were an idol to be preserved. This is not humility. This is fear with spiritualized language. The raw truth? Your greatest loss was not money. It was vision. You are not stuck because the world blocked you. You are stuck because you learned to think like someone who only reacts, never governs. The system only amplifies what is already inside. It does not create mentality. It reveals it. That is why two men enter the same crisis. One builds empires. The other builds excuses. The difference was never opportunity. It was interpretation. And here comes the inversion few accept. If your life is not advancing, responsibility is not a burden. It is a gift. Because if the problem were the world, you would be condemned. But if the problem is in the mind, then the way out is there too. The kingdom of God does not operate by victimhood. It operates by mental stewardship. Jesus never asked, "Who stopped you?" He always asked, "What did you do with what you received?" As long as you insist on blaming the scenario, you will remain a supporting character in your own story. But the moment you assume, the enemy is not out there and it infiltrates my thoughts, something changes. The blame leaves the world, and the power returns to you. And that is terrifying for those who have spent their whole lives outsourcing decisions. So tell me now, do you want to remain comfortable with sophisticated excuses? Or are you ready to face the real adversary, the mind you have tolerated for years? The most dangerous enemy of your life makes no noise. It does not appear as a scandalous sin. It does not come dressed as obvious temptation. It presents itself as a reasonable thought. That is why almost no one fights it. Napoleon Hill was surgical when he wrote, "Think and grow rich." The mind is the only battlefield where all the battles of life are decided. He was not talking about motivation. He was describing a law. The mind is not a neutral place. It is a territory, and every territory that is not governed is invaded. What sabotages your destiny is not a lack of faith. It is hijacked attention. Hill called this control of attention. Whoever does not consciously choose where to focus lives reacting to whatever appears. The Bible calls it something else. As a man thinks in his soul, so is he. Proverbs 23:7. Not how he prays, not how he sings, not how he fasts, but how he thinks, interprets, decides. Most people live with a divided mind. One part wants to grow, another part is terrified of losing. One part believes, another part sabotages. One part prays, another part runs from responsibility. Napoleon Hill identified this pattern and called it indecision, and he was ruthless. Indecision is the greatest killer of opportunity. The Bible agrees without softening it. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. James chapter 1:8. Not in some, in all. A divided mind does not only lose money, it loses direction. And here is the point almost no one wants to accept. Fear does not paralyze you by shouting. It paralyzes you by arguing. Now is not the time. I need more confirmation. I'll wait a little longer. When I have more, when God opens the door, these phrases sound prudent, but many times they are just spiritually sophisticated delays. Hill called fear the great invisible saboteur. He listed 6 main fears, all with biblical roots: fear of poverty, criticism, loss, illness, old age, and death. But the most lethal thing is not fear itself. It is the normalization of fear. When fear becomes the decision-making criterion, you no longer govern, you react. The Bible calls this living according to the flesh, not as moral sin, but as a life governed by stimuli, sensations, and threats. And here distraction enters, fear's silent ally. You don't need to be in sin to be lost. You just need to be distracted. Hill was blunt. A mind occupied with trivialities builds nothing lasting. And Jesus echoes this centuries earlier. The cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word. Matthew 13:22. The word was planted. The potential was there, but it was choked, not uprooted. In other words, it was not the devil who killed the destiny. It was a mind too busy to cultivate. The invisible enemy does not want you to sin. He just wants you not to focus, because a scattered mind never comes into agreement with itself. And without internal agreement, there is no external power. Understand this now. Everything God gave you to win must first win inside your mind. The war does not begin in the wallet. It begins in interpretation. It does not begin in the bank account. It begins in attention. And as long as you do not identify this invisible enemy, you will keep fighting external battles with a mind already defeated internally. There comes a moment when every mature mind must face an uncomfortable truth. We are not dealing with opinions, lifestyles, or theological lines. We are dealing with laws. Laws do not ask permission. Laws do not care about intentions. Laws operate regardless of your emotional faith in them. Napoleon Hill understood this early. That is why he never wrote like a motivational cheerleader. He wrote like someone who identified a universal principle of how the human mind works. Hill called this principle burning desire. Not superficial desire, not occasional will, not vague hope. Burning desire is an internal decision so defined that it reorganizes thoughts, focus, behavior, and identity. Hill was explicit. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Notice the order. Conceive, believe, achieve. Now observe the biblical testimony without religious filters. Proverbs 4:23 declares, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." The text does not say the heart reacts to life. It says life flows from it. Jesus reinforces the same law in Matthew 12:34. For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. And he seals it in Mark 11:23. Whoever says to this mountain, "Be lifted up and thrown into the sea," and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will happen, it will be done for him. Napoleon Hill calls it defined desire. The Bible calls it a full heart. Different names, same mechanism. Now comes the point that dismantles fragile spirituality. It is not prayer that moves mountains. It is aligned internal authority. Prayer only works when it does not contradict the mental system that sustains it. You can pray for prosperity with a mind programmed to avoid risk. You can pray for expansion with an identity that feels unworthy of growth. You can declare promises while your subconscious works to keep everything exactly the same. Hill called this internal conflict. The Bible calls it a divided heart. And James is surgical, without poetry. The one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. This is not punishment. It is a description of how things function. An unstable mind cannot sustain creation. A divided mind cannot govern reality. Understand the weight of this. When Hill speaks of faith, he is not talking about religious belief. He is talking about operational conviction. And when the Bible speaks of faith, it is not talking about optimism. It is talking about internal certainty that produces practical obedience. Hebrews 11 does not praise people who felt something nice. It praises people who acted before seeing, because the vision was already settled inside. Hill and the Bible agree on a point that destroys excuses. The external world responds to internal coherence, not intention. That is why two people read the same verse, hear the same message, live in the same country, and have opposite results. It is not God favoring one and ignoring the other. It is the law responding to those aligned with it. Burning desire in Hill's language is the same as a fully surrendered heart in biblical language. No internal negotiation. No emotional plan B. No secret exit for cowardice. And here is the sentence that seals this triple authority. Where there is no absolute internal decision, there is no sustainable external power. This is not mysticism. It is not coaching. It is law. And laws do not adapt to your comfort zone. You adapt to them, or you pay the price. Few people understand this, but most biblical promises were not delayed by a lack of divine power. They were delayed by persistent mental error. Let's go to the most didactic and uncomfortable case of all, Israel in the desert. They were not pagans. They were not unbelievers in the classic sense. They were not ignorant of the promises. They saw the sea open. They saw the enemy army swallowed. They ate supernatural manna. They drank water from the rock. They were guided by fire at night and cloud by day. In other words, miracle was never the problem. Even so, an entire generation died outside the promised land. Why? The answer is not in the desert. It is in the mind. In Numbers 13, 12 spies are sent to observe the land. All 12 see the same thing, same geography, same giants, same fortified cities, but they return with two completely different mental reports. 10 say, "We cannot. They are stronger. We are like grasshoppers." 2 say, "We will certainly go up and possess it." The text does not say the giants were imaginary. The danger was real. The risk existed. The difference was not the scenario. It was the interpretation. And here is the key that connects the Bible and Napoleon Hill with surgical precision. The 10 spies analyzed the promise from their old identity. Joshua and Caleb analyzed the risk from the covenant. Napoleon Hill explains this when he talks about self-image. The mind always tries to protect what it believes it is. If you see yourself as a slave, every territory looks too dangerous. If you see yourself as an heir, the same territory becomes a mission. Israel left Egypt physically in one night, but did Egypt leave their mind? Never. They still thought like servants, evaluated like slaves, decided like those who do not govern. That is why God did not punish them with the desert. The desert was simply the environment that revealed who they still were. Hebrews 3 explains the diagnosis without softening it. They were not able to enter because of unbelief. But unbelief here is not atheism. It is the inability to sustain an internal decision in the face of risk. Napoleon Hill calls this lack of definite decision. The Bible calls it a hardened heart. Now notice something crucial. Joshua and Caleb did not deny the giants. They denied the giants the right to define the future. They did not say there is no risk. They said risk does not govern. That is the mindset that crosses promises. And here comes the hardest point for those stuck today. God did not change the promise because of the wrong mindset. He changed the generation. The promise remained intact. Those who refused to align their minds did not. This reveals a brutal kingdom law. God does not negotiate destiny with a slave mentality. It is not punishment. It is coherence. The same God who opened the sea did not open the promised land to those who still thought too small to govern it. Napoleon Hill would say, they were not ready to sustain success. The Bible would say, they were not ready to possess the inheritance. Same law, same conclusion. Every promise requires a compatible mind. Without it, the miracle becomes memory, not legacy. And the question this story leaves you with is unavoidable. Are you facing giants? Or repeating old reports that should already be dead? There comes a point where information no longer solves anything. Those still stuck after hearing all this do not need more content. They need internal rupture. Because what we are talking about here is not new knowledge. It is an ancient manual that has always been open, but it only works for those willing to operate by laws, not emotions. The Bible is not a devotional book to soothe anxiety. It is a mental governance treaty, a kingdom operating code. Napoleon Hill understood this outside the religious environment. Jesus taught it inside it. And both agree on something uncomfortable. The world is divided between those who read laws and those who pray for exceptions. Most people want a punctual intervention, an isolated miracle, a door that opens without the mind needing to change. But the kingdom does not function by emotional shortcuts. It functions by structural alignment. That is why Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you." He was not being poetic. He was being technical. The kingdom does not manifest where there is intense crying, but where there is internal order. Now pay attention to this key. God does not release environments you cannot yet sustain mentally. This explains why some people prosper and then lose everything. Why some receive opportunities and sabotage relationships. Why some get close, but never remain. The problem is not access. It is maintenance. Napoleon Hill calls this the inability to sustain success due to lack of compatible identity. The Bible calls it putting new wine into old wineskins. It is not punishment. It is spiritual physics. Now imagine this as a war code. Every territory requires a minimum level of internal governance. If the mind cannot sustain pressure, decision, risk, and responsibility, the territory becomes too dangerous. That is why fear is so valued by a slave mentality. Fear keeps everything small, predictable, controllable. But excessive safety is just sophisticated prison. You were not created to manage survival. You were created to expand dominion. Since Genesis, the mandate was never preserve. It was be fruitful, multiply, govern. Maintenance was never obedience. Maintenance is stagnation with acceptable language. And here is the breaking point. Whoever does not accept the discomfort of growth inevitably accepts the comfort of mediocrity. There is no third way. The kingdom does not grow by intention. It grows by sustained decision under pressure. And that requires something almost no one wants to hear. You must abandon the identity that brought you here to access the level ahead. Every spiritual promotion requires the death of an old version. Every expansion requires mental detachment. This is the code. This is the key. This is the manual. And now the tension increases because the question is no longer theoretical. Do you want to understand? Or do you want to cross over? Because crossing over requires something information will never require: positioning. And in the next block, I will not explain anything else. I will lead you. Listen carefully, not as someone consuming content, but as someone executing a command. Nothing that comes next works if treated as metaphor. It only works if treated as decision. Reaching a new level is not the greatest challenge. The real challenge is staying there. Many people experience punctual breakthroughs, temporary gains, moments of abundance, but then return to the exact same scarcity pattern. Not because God removed the blessing, but because internal governance was never consolidated. Prosperity is not sustained by emotion. It is sustained by structure. When mentality changes but habits remain the same, the old system always pulls you back. That is why governing is not an isolated act. It is a continuous state of consciousness, decision, and alignment. Internal governance begins when you understand there is no neutrality. Either you govern your thoughts or they govern you. Either you define priorities or chaos decides for you. A mind that governs abundance does not negotiate principles on hard days. It does not abandon processes when emotions fluctuate. It does not outsource responsibility to the environment, the past, or God. It integrates faith, strategy, and discipline. Faith without discipline becomes speech. Discipline without faith becomes burden. Strategy without identity becomes anxiety. Internal governance emerges when these three dimensions operate together. You learn to observe your thoughts before obeying them. You learn to identify when fear tries to disguise itself as prudence. You learn to perceive when haste wants to decide in place of wisdom. This is spiritual maturity applied to practical life. Maintaining internal governance requires vigilance, not against people, not against the system, but against old patterns trying to reclaim control. The greatest enemy of your future prosperity is the old version of yourself that still wants comfort without responsibility. That is why mature financial decisions are not made only when everything is fine. They are maintained when everything tightens. That is when governance is proven. You do not need more revelations. You need coherence. Coherence between what you believe and what you practice, between what you pray and what you organize, between what you declare and what you sustain daily. The kingdom is not established by impulse. It is established by constancy. When internal governance is active, money stops being a source of anxiety and becomes a tool of mission. Growth stops being frightening and becomes assumed responsibility. You do not chase abundance. You create an environment where it can remain. And this is the final difference between those who only experience moments of prosperity and those who build a governed life. Abundance is not something that happens to you. It is something that responds to those who govern. When internal governance is maintained, the external organizes itself. And then finally, prosperity stops being a distant promise and becomes a functional, sustainable system aligned with purpose.